All right, folks, welcome to Math 99. Let me give you just a little bit of an introduction to this particular course. The course was designed a few years ago to enable students attending Susquehanna University to be better prepared for taking any particular math courses at SU. In particular, students are required to take something called an analytical thought course, which would mean you would either take pre-calculus or calculus or introduction to statistics. Most people take the introduction to statistics course. So this particular course was designed to give you a brief review of high school algebra. And then also, after we do that, that's the first half of the course, then we will do an introduction to statistics. So there will be homework every day. Your daily workbook that you have, or I will be emailing you depending upon whether this course is being taught online or whether you're actually in a classroom with me. It depends. It can be made to do both areas. If you're in a classroom with me, you'll have a workbook. If you're online, you'll be getting these daily assignments emailed to you. Okay, so anyway, basically there are 3 pages of work per class period. What I will do is go over the first page with you to show you what we're going to be doing as far as the concepts for that day. And then you will have 2 pages for homework, okay? That will be either given to me the next class period, or if you're online, you'll be taking a picture of it and emailing it to me, okay? So that's what you're going to be graded on. You will have homework every day, plus you also have a midterm, and you also have a final. All right, so let's get started. We want to start with positive and negative numbers, okay? And then we're going to move on to adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers and the order of operations today. All right, so the first thing that we want to talk about is negative numbers. We are all aware of the fact that there are such thing as negative numbers. Anybody that has gone outside on a cold morning and said, wow, it's really cold, it's 5 below 0, -5. When you play golf, if you're so many strokes below par, you might have a -10 score, where 10 strokes below par. So there's all kinds of various places where you can use negative numbers. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about here are these 2 vertical lines around the 5. The 2 vertical lines around the 5 are the absolute value. Absolute value and I want to make sure you can all see that. It's pretty clear. Absolute value is the distance from 0. Okay? So in other words, anytime you see these 2 vertical lines, I'm simply asking you the question, how far is that number from 0? I mean, it's 5. 5 is 5 units from 0, okay? -3. -3 is to the left of 0, which means it's smaller than 0. As the negative numbers get, quote unquote, bigger, they actually get smaller, if you understand what I'm talking about there. So the absolute value of -3 is 3 units to the left. It's still 3. X here, the absolute value of x is equal to 5. X would be 5. That's how far it is. Absolute value of x is -7. I don't think so. Okay, it's always distance from 0. This answer can never, ever be a negative number. How about the absolute value of the opposite of x is 4? Well, I know for a number to be 4 units away from 0 could either be a +4 or a -4. You put either one of those in there, take the opposite of it, you're going to get -4 or +4, and its absolute value is still 4. So x can be -4 or +4. Let's talk a little bit about powers. Now, we'll come back to exponents in a day or so and talk about them in much more detail. Hopefully, you all remember that 3 to the 2nd power means 3 times 3. So this is 9. 2 cubed, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. Here, -1 to an even power. Now, down here, we're going to talk a little bit more about multiplying. But when you have a negative times a negative, think about a negative sign. Think about a negative sign simply as being the word opposite. Okay? So this is the opposite of 1. A -1 is the opposite of 1. Okay? So if you have 2 negative signs, the opposite of a -2 is a +2. So 2 negative signs multiplied together make a positive. So if I have -1 raised to the 56th power, that's 56 -1s all multiplied together. Every 2 negative signs make a positive. Every 2 negative signs make a positive because it's an even number, 56. You're going to have none left over when you pair them up. All the negative signs will go to positives, and 1 times itself 56 times is still 1. So this is a +1. This one, when you pair them up, every 2 negative signs, you're going to have 1 negative sign left over because it's an odd number. -1 to the 79th then would be -1. That last negative sign makes your whole answer negative. Now, this is what gives a lot of people trouble. This is -1 to the 4th power with no parentheses. That means, if you remember from high school, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Please starts with a P for parentheses. Excuse, E is exponents, right? Then multiplications and divisions, then additions and subtractions. It's the order of operation. So you do exponents here before you multiply by the -1. And a lot of people have trouble with that. They want to take 4 -1s. That's not what that problem is. That problem is 4 1s. Multiplied is 1. Then you take the opposite of it. Okay? So be very careful on that one. As I just mentioned, the further you go to the left, the numbers get smaller. So -12 would be the smallest number, then -2, then 0, then 3, then 5, then 7. Everybody with me? How about here, smallest to biggest? Do the negatives first. -11, -5, 0, 3, 5, 7, and 12. Correct? Now remember what I just said. Here's your less than sign. The easy way, if you have trouble remembering these, the easy way, the less than sign looks like a capital L. The less than sign looks like a capital L, so that's a less than sign greater than or equal to. Negatives are always less than positives, so that's less than. Here, -11 is further to the left than -7, so this would be greater than. And I'll tell you the way I do it. The way I do it, I look at them. 11 is normally bigger than 7, but because they're both negative, it flips. That's the easy way. 11 is bigger, but because they're both negative, it flips, and 7 would be greater. -7 is greater than -11. Here, once again, negatives are always smaller, less than positives. Here, the -30 is further to the left, or say it the way I just said, 30 is always bigger, but because they're both negatives, flip it, so -22 is bigger. Okay? And the last one, I think I have it too big. I can't tell what that last problem is. Let me just boost this down a little bit. And it is it's 12 divided by -2 and a -6. So 12 divided by -2 is -6. So -6 and -6 would be equal. So let's go back to the way I had it. Okay. All right. Now, that's putting positives and negatives in the right order. Now let's talk about adding and subtracting. Okay? When you add and subtract, oh, there's my friend popping up. Don't you just love pop-ups? See if I can get rid of this dumb thing. So to get rid of the pop-up, I'm going to ignore that. Okay, so let's try it again. When you add positives and negatives, okay? When you add positives and negatives, two negatives, it's like I owe somebody $9 and I owe somebody else $5. I have two debts. A -9 plus a -5 is a bigger debt. I'm going to owe 14. Now, where you might get confused, I just talked about two negative signs multiplying is positive, but two negative signs adding is addition. Keep that straight. I'll say it again. Two negative signs multiplying is a positive. Two negative signs adding is a negative. Now, what if one's positive and one's negative? Like if I have $5, but I owe somebody $9, I can pay them the $5, but I'm going to still end up owing $4. Okay, so what you have to do is subtract the numbers and give it the sign of the biggest. That is a very important rule. Subtract. This is when you have different signs. When you have different signs, you need to subtract and give sign of biggest. Okay? Subtract and give a sign of the biggest. All right. -9 and 5, simply subtract them when you see the signs are different. You get 4 and make it -4. Subtract them. Give it sign of the biggest, +4. Whoa, two negatives. Add them up, it's a bigger debt. -14. Two negatives. Add them up. -17. Two negatives. Add them up. -12. Okay? Let's move on down. Okay. Here are some more problems. Now, everybody's going to say, well, what's the rules for subtraction? I think the best way to do this is just pretend subtraction doesn't exist. There is no such thing as subtraction. This is a -6 and a -3. Two negatives. It's a -9, right? Here are the two negatives. Remember what I said about two negatives multiplying? Those two negatives kill each other. And you ought to mark that on your paper right away, plus and plus. So then it's a -6 and a +3. You subtract and give it the sign of the biggest. It's -3. Did you all catch that? You're going to make these both positives. Both positives. -6 and +3. You subtract and give it the sign of the biggest is -3. A 6 and a -3 is +3. You subtract and give it the sign of the biggest. Kill the two negatives. 6 plus 3 is 9. Kill the two negatives. 0 plus 5 is 5. Now this one's a little tricky. Kill the two negatives. Makes it 5. But now the signs are different. So you subtract and give it the sign of the biggest. 9 minus 5 is 4. Make it -9. -4, pardon me. Okay. Here's multiplying and dividing. Piece of cake. The hardest thing is adding because you have to remember this rule. When you have different signs, you subtract and give it the sign of the biggest. When you multiply and divide, just do the multiplication and division like you've always done it, then count your signs. If it's an even number, it's positive. If it's a negative, it's negative. If it's an odd number, it's negative. Here we go. 5 divided by 1 is 5. Make it -5. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Two negatives make it +5. Two negatives. 16 divided by 8, it's a +2. One negative. 16 divided by 8, make it a -2. 20 divided by 2 is 10. There's two negatives, positive. 0 divided by anything is 0. -2, here's multiplication. It's 10. One negative, -10. 10, two negatives, +10. 12, 1 negative, negative 12. 12, 2 negatives, make it positive. Whoa, a lot of multiplication and then a division. You do them as you see them. So 9 times 2 is 18, divided by 3 is 6. 1 negative, negative 6. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 negatives stays a positive 2. Let's go on down and talk a little bit about order of operations. As I mentioned before, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay? You do parentheses first, exponents second. Then you do these in the order you see them. Multiplications and divisions comes first. You don't do multiplications before divisions. You just, and that's why I wrote them up and down. You do them in the order they come, okay? And then you do additions and subtractions last. All right, so here I've got some parentheses, I've got multiplication, I've got division. All right, so let's talk about it. I'm going to go through here and do the multiplications and divisions as I see them. So I have 3. This 4 times 5 is 20, positive. Here I have these parentheses I need to do first. Parentheses, 6 divided by 3 is 2. Times a negative 2 is negative 4, but the opposite of a negative is a positive 4. Yeah? So I have 3 plus 20 is 23, plus 4 is 27. Okay? Let's go over to this one. I've got some parentheses I need to do first. That's 6 times 3 is 18. Then 2 negatives make a positive 15. 18 and 15 is 33. Over here, just do the multiplications and divisions as you see them and do the addition last. 12 times 2 is 24. Divided by 3 is 8. 2 negatives make a positive 8. 5 divided by 5 is 1, but there's one negative sign. It's a negative 1. Now you do the addition. So the signs are different. You subtract to give it the sign of the biggest, positive 7. All right, so if x is 3 and y is negative 2, I don't see a y, so let's just use x is 3. I'm going to have 7 minus 5 times 3 minus 3 squared. Okay? Now, we do exponents first. 3 squared is 9. That is not negative 3 squared. Remember, we talked about this. It's just 3 squared is 9. So I have 7 minus 15 minus 9. Okay, 7 and a negative 15. You subtract and give it the sign the biggest is negative 8. Negative 8 and negative 9 is negative 17. Okay? Over here, I don't know why I keep putting the y in there. There's no y there. So x is just 3. That's the same problem. Okay, so we know the answer was, what did I say, negative 17, I think, right? All right, so here we go down here. Look at these brackets. So I must do this whole thing before I divide by 4. Now, this is going to be tricky, so be very careful here. Inside the brackets, you have parentheses. So I have to do this portion first, even though it's addition. So 7 plus negative 5. The signs are different. You subtract, you get 2. Give it the sign of the biggest, positive 2. 2 times negative 2, negative 4. Divided by 4 is negative 1. Big ugly problem here. I do multiplications and divisions as I see them. 2 times 6 is 12. Minus 5, this would be minus 14. One negative sign keeps it negative. Now here, some people want to do the multiplication before the division. No way. You do the multiplications and divisions as you see them. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 negatives makes it negative 4. I'll do that again. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4, but there's 3 negatives makes it a negative 4. So I don't care how you do it. 12 minus 5 is 7. and that's a negative 18. So a 7 and a negative 18, you would subtract and give it the sign the biggest. 7 and negative 18 should be negative 11. Okay? All right, so there was a quickie introduction to positive and negative numbers. All right, you will have 2 pages. The B and C part of day 1 will be due our next class period. If you have any questions, get in touch with me.